Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to my new channel. Today I'm going to be talking about Huawei, the challenges it faces and the steps it's taking to survive the American chip ban. Anyway, before I continue, I'd like to request that you kindly subscribe, you like, comment, whatever you can to support the channel. If you can donate, that'll be even better. So without further ado, let's get on with the show. So as you know, Huawei's been hit hard, very hard by the United States. Trump back then and USA had put a ban on Huawei buying advanced chips, which is a huge problem because their main business is mobile phones, and their most advanced phones use chipset which is 5 nanometers. Their only manufacturer which was providing them with that chip was TSMC, and because of the ban, TSMC have stopped supplying that chipset to Huawei. So as it stands, guys, things are not looking good for Huawei. They have bought a huge amount of chipsets before the ban. I think it's about 2 years worth, but it's about to run out. I think it's going to be running out this year very soon. They have been producing phones, but very limited number, and because it's a very limited number, it's very expensive to get hold of Huawei phones. So yeah, it's not looking good. So unless there's a miracle that happens, so when I say miracle, I mean, say the ban is overturned by the States for some reason, or China is able to create 5 nanometer chips by itself. So unless one of the two happens, things are not looking good for Huawei, so I'll admit that. But however, Huawei is not sitting there taking it like a punch bag. Huawei is doing stuff in the background. For example, Google had stopped working with Huawei, which means Huawei phones were not allowed to use Google products. So what Huawei did, it developed its own operating system. It's called the Hongmen OS, or Harmony OS in the West it's called, and basically it doesn't need Google anymore. It's got its own operating system, its own GPS, its own software, its own application. But the best thing about Harmony OS is because it's compatible with many millions and millions of devices called IoTs. So it's the Internet of Things, basically. So we're living in the age now where every product will have access to the Internet. Every product will have an application, and you can load it onto your phone, etc. So this is the way that Harmony OS is better than Apple and Google in many ways, and it's scalable, and also you can use it on EVs with your car, for example. So with your fridge, you know, there's so many smart devices and smart solutions coming up over the next few years, and Harmony OS will be the main focal point. So yeah, so that's a bit of good news for Huawei. The bad news is they're still in a dire situation regarding the chips, the semiconductor chips. They still have not found a solution for that, and like I said, unless there's a miracle, things are not looking good for Huawei. So unless China comes up with a 5 nanometer chip over the next few years, I don't think the Huawei smartphone business will survive. They might have to sell it or come up with another solution. However, they're not sitting back and doing nothing. Like I said before, they are doing stuff. So I want to talk about graphene. Graphene is the future, guys. Huawei has recently added a new patent to build graphene transistors, and you can see here the dawn of the carbon-based chips is coming. They say this because a lot of industry experts are saying we are coming to the end of silicon chips. The current chips are silicon chips. The ones that are made by TSMC, Intel, Samsung, they're all silicon based. And a lot of people are saying that's coming to an end, probably of the next few years. TSMC are creating 5 nanometers chips, but they are probably going to come out with 3 nanometers. I believe there's IBM coming out with 2 nanometers. So between 2 and 3 nanometers is probably going to be the end. Anything below that, it gets very difficult. We're talking about a lot more expenditure in terms of equipment, a lot more power needed, not more energy intensive, and you probably won't get the benefits back. If I mean, you can probably get the benefits between 2 and 3 nanometers, but anything below, it's just not worth it. A lot of Japanese companies actually stopped making silicon chips from 28 nanometers because they didn't think it was economically viable. So a lot of that's why the Japanese companies have stopped competing with TSMC and other companies, because for them it wasn't economically viable to carry on, pursuing chips smaller and smaller. But things are changing now, and we're looking at the future. And I think if China concentrates on the future, and if Huawei concentrates on the future, they will be in a position where they can catch up in the next 5 years, not with the old technology, but with new technologies. This is because everybody is on the same page when it comes to graphene chips. America, TSMC and all these other companies, they're still focusing on silicon chips and trying to get them smaller and smaller and smaller. So while all these companies are focusing on smaller based silicon chips, I believe if China and Huawei and other Chinese companies focus on graphene chips for the next 2 to 3 years, 4 years, they will be in a position, a market leader within 5 years, as a market leader in graphene chips. And in 5 years, that's how China's going to not only catch up, but take over the West. Because TSMC guys, they're still focusing on getting their silicon chips smaller and smaller. And the lithium and EUV machines that they have is based on silicon materials. So all of their investment that they've got, Samsung, TSMC, Intel, all of these EUV machines, DUV machines they have, is all based on silicon architecture. So I believe that they're not going to get rid of all of that equipment overnight. They're going to be carrying using it as a silicon based product. So if China doesn't have any of these EUV machines, I think they should just focus on creating graphene transistors. And you don't need EUV machines. You'll need brand new machines to get these to work. And it's better to sometimes start from scratch. So what the hell is graphene? Well, graphene is 1,000,000 times thinner than hair, but 200 times stronger than steel. It can be used in applications like consumer electronics, or really extreme stuff like space elevators, where you need very, very strong material and very light material and very thin material for that to work. It was invented more than a century ago, actually, 2004, in Manchester, England, by 2 scientists, which I can't remember the name of. I'll try and get their names later and add them to the description. They got a piece of graphite and they removed it layer by layer using sticky tape until they got a single layer left. Graphene is a single layer of graphite, and graphite is what you find in a pencil, the part you write with, and that's graphite, and a single layer of that is graphene. But instead of 3D shaped graphite in pencils, it's a single layer 1 atom thick, which is arranged in a honeycomb, and each atom is covalently bonded to 3 more around it, so makes it very, very strong and very stable. Also, because of the way it's shaped, the atoms delocalize the electrons, meaning the electrons move around much more freely, and that's why it's a great conductor, and that's why it will be an amazing transistor for the future. So if it's so good and it's so amazing, why is it not taken off? Why aren't there so many graphene products in the market right now? Why aren't there any graphene chips? Well, I'll tell you why. It's for a couple of reasons. Number one, mass production. There isn't a way to mass produce graphene at the moment, because it's still in its early stages, and the processes right now to mass produce graphene are very, very expensive, and they cannot replace what's there at the moment. And especially true with semiconductors right now, because to replace the current silicon architecture with graphene would be very, very expensive. Firstly, you need to mass produce your graphene. Silicon is basically costs next to nothing. Also, you got to think about the billions and billions that's already invested in silicon architecture. Basically, companies like ASML use DUV and EUV machines, and they create nanometer chips as small as 5 nanometers and 3 nanometers, and these are the machines used by TSMC, Samsung, Intel, for example, And these companies have invested billions and billions and billions with these machines. So because everything's going through the silicon based architecture, change it to graphene, it would be I'm not saying they're not investigating graphene, but right now they're not looking to change to graphene because of the amount of money they've invested in these machines, etc. And ASML, if they want to use graphenes, maybe their next generation machines would kind of use graphenes, but right now even ASML is using silicon based architecture. So my point is, the whole world is still using silicon, even though it's coming to the end of its life cycle. I would probably estimate another 5 to 10 years they will be using silicon. But the first country or first company to develop graphene based chips, then that company would become a trillionaire. I mean, there's no stopping that company or stopping that country, because that would be the first technology which uses graphene chips, and these graphene chips can make phones and laptops 1,000 times faster than what we have now, and because of that, that would make that company the king or the queen. Another path Huawei is also taking is creating the photonic chip as well. And the photonic chip is different from the quantum chip. It's very different. What's the photonic chips? What's photonics? Well, as you know, electrons are pretty fast. They move around 100k meters per second. And that's how long it takes for electrons to move around current silicon-based chips. So there is something faster, and it's called photons. Photons move around in light speed. And currently fiber optics use photons to move data around in light speed. But scientists are still trying to figure out how to create light-based transistors. And photonics pretty much go into quantum computing territory. So with the current architecture, the silicon-based architecture, transistors have something called gates. And these gates open and close, which means you can have two values, either the 1 or the 0. And this is where all the calculations are based from. And with the photon, basically you would have beams of light going from one end to another end, and instead of using two values, 1 or the 0, it uses something called a qubit, and basically means you can be using a 1 or the 0, or you can use a 1 and a 0 at the same time, which means it can do a lot more calculations based on that. Now going back to this article, I'm just going to pick bits and pieces from it. Huawei launched a big move and begun to develop photonic chips. The performance of the chip is far better than ordinary integrated circuits. The advantage of the chip is in the transmission performance. The most important thing is that research in this field has just started, and the European and American countries have not yet formed a monopoly, which means if China takes the lead in breaking through the application of photonic chips, it can reverse its current disadvantages. In addition, this chip manufacturing process is completely different from the past. It does not require a lithography machine at all, and I repeat, does not require a lithography machine. It will use brand new manufacturing technology. The Dutch media have discovered the most critical point. They claim that US lithography machine blockade will soon lose its effect. In the future, we may not need these lithography machines at all. So as you can see, guys, even the ASML president and CEO has says, we're coming to an end with these lithography machines, the EUV, the DUV machines. We're coming to an end of the cycle. And if they don't allow these machines to be sold to China, China's going to develop their own and surpass them in the next few years. And that's why ASML is not very happy about this ban, because they could have made trillions selling these machines to China. Instead, they've been blocked, and now China's going to try and develop their own technology. Even the Dutch media is acknowledging that this action is wrong by the US to ban these equipment to China, ban semiconductors to China, and especially doing what they're doing to Huawei. And I know Huawei is taking a big hit, guys, and yeah, in the short term, it's going to take a miracle for Huawei's smartphone to survive, but in the long term I think Huawei will become a better business. I mean, they are diversifying. They've realized that they cannot rely on the US. China has realized they cannot rely on the US, and this has all caused China, with its 1.4 billion people, to start looking at themselves rather than America, relying on other countries. Now they're all becoming self-sufficient. They're spending billions and billions to be self-sufficient, and it's driven China and it's woken the dragon, and 1.4 billion people are now determined to find a solution to these semiconductors, and I'm sure they will. Finally guys, I just want to touch on the fact that 6G networks and how important 6G networks are with graphene, because this is why I believe Huawei will be taking the lead with graphene and all the graphene solutions in the future. In the next 10 years, when 6G is released by Huawei, these 6Gs will be graphene based, and most of the products Huawei will produce will be graphene based. So this is why I believe Huawei will focus on the graphene side of things, because they can use these graphenes not only on their 6G networks, but they can also use them for their other products, and as well as their smartphones as well, and their semiconductors. So I'm just going to kind of go through this article quickly, and it says substance is essential to 6G networks. It's talking about graphene. Graphene enables supercapacitors, reprogrammable intelligent surfaces, and embedded plasmodic antennas. First commercial deployments using 1 terahertz, possibly by 2030. It will use less power, produce less heat, amplify 6G beams, and boost spectrum efficiency. Things can move fast in telecoms. Not only last week the focus was on graphene technology and its application on 5G. Now comes the news of graphene's potential central player in 6G communications, which will not be a reality until 2030. A fascinating new report from Cambridge, UK headquartered. By the way guys, Cambridge is where Huawei headquarters are, also in UK, so they're building some anyway. So it's a bit of a coincidence where all of this is coming from Huawei, from Cambridge, UK, and I believe this is one of the reasons, because Cambridge is the leading line in developing 6G networks. So a lot of people don't really know that. So I'm not going to go technically into this too much, but as you can see, 6G and graphene go together very well, and I believe if Huawei becomes a market leader in graphene, not only can it use it for its 6G, its base business, its main business, but it can also use it for its other businesses like its mobile phones. He can create his own foundry, create graphene chips, and he can also use these chips on his other products as well that Huawei is using. And in the future, maybe Huawei can create his own EV cars as well. Right now he's only creating the software for these cars to run, but in the future he might create his own EV cars. But yeah, there's a lot of applications for these graphene chips, and I think if Huawei does everything really well and it does everything successfully, and it starts pushing all its research into graphene, 6G and semiconductor, because right now, you know, the company itself is not doing too badly. It's made a little bit of a profit, but it's not like an American company where it's got a lot of shareholders. Huawei is owned by its employees. Employees have the shares in Huawei, so all the employees will be pushing for this. They'll all be working extra hard to try and find this solution, and I'm sure they will. And good luck to them, guys. Anyway, if there's any questions and discussions you want to have, then speak on the comment section. If you want to subscribe and like and hit the bell icon, I'll be really appreciative of that. And if you really like this channel, and if you really like what I talk about, then don't forget to donate, buy me a coffee or Patreon. Again, I would really appreciate that. For my Patreon, I will create an account for Discord soon, so you'll be able to talk to me privately and have maybe video sessions privately. We can talk about some of these topics. We talk about future topics, what you would like me to talk about. So my Patreon is gonna hopefully kick off very soon with lots of new things and lots of new ideas. So yeah, thanks guys for all the support so far, and I'll see you in the next video.